actually use it, like interact in an online lesson, go for that video. I can share that link as well at the end. But yeah, this is a really cool tool to use. But this actually takes me, so today the idea is to talk a little bit about feedback, right? So that way we can kind of get different ideas and have a big chat
Right.
on how we can offer effective feedback, because I definitely think that we struggle with this sometimes. And I think that as teachers, I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys, but I feel like sometimes like I'm giving feedback and then I see like the face of horror on my student's face, and I'm just like, how do I say this in the best possible way? Like how do I not make
Yeah,
them
yeah.
feel bad, or how else can I do this? So the idea for today is to kind of go through that and see what we can do. Now, I'm actually going to be using a tool that I know Rodri can also talk hours about because he loves it. I love it. And it's Miro. So this is another tool that we
Miro.
found. Out of all of the whiteboards that we've used, this is our favorite. This is our go-to whiteboard, and it
Mhm.
has absolutely everything on it. And you can get other people to actually come on the board so that they can be able to like write with you and do other
It's
things with you, like
collaborative.
collaborate. Exactly. And it has also like a lot of grids, ready-made like charts or grids that you can use,
Mhm.
templates that you can use.
Mhm.
So if you want to do something and it's just something really easy, you can create your own. You can just use one of the ready-made templates and then create your activity, which I think is really easy to use. So I'm going to be using that one for today. And the idea is to kind of go through the different like strategies that we can get better
Mhm.
effective feedback. Now, to start off, I have a big question for you guys. So what do you think makes effective feedback? What is effective feedback in your minds? And as you guys speak, I'll just take some notes so we can all share and get our ideas straight. So what do you guys think?
Mm, I guess that effective feedback would be um like telling our students or approaching them from a place of improving, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
like the I would say the objective of effective feedback. I would always try to seek improvement,
Mm-hmm.
but I I do think that it's necessary to be real during the feedback, right? You just have to be as
Honest.
gentle as possible,
Yeah.
but honesty is very important. I mean, you cannot tell them,
Mhm.
"Oh, perfect, you're beautiful." I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the
Okay,
you're
well, I wouldn't
doing
call it
great.
honesty. I'd call it tact. I mean,
Okay.
exactly.
yeah, it takes calculations. That approach is not a rough one. It's a soft
Mm-hmm.
one. It's a personal one. It's a professional one. We all know how to measure that
Yeah.
landing to say it has to go in slow, it has to come in this, it has to come in afterwards, it has to come in at certain times. We all get that feeling where we know how. We have, I don't know if you can call it that. We have a designed approach, but that always
Mm-hmm.
changes on upon approach.
Uh-huh. Of course.
And I think it also changes with different people. Like I've had students who are like, give it to me. Like
Yeah,
tell
straight
me
up.
what you want. Straight up, tell me what I'm doing
Tell
wrong.
me
I
what.
don't care. Just say it.
Yeah.
Where I have other ones that are literally like if I make any correction, they'll start crying. So it's like I think it also like ranges a
Mhm.
lot as so you can
Exactly.
read people and see
Hmm.
how they react to things. So I love seeking improvement, like being like having that tact and being real with them, but being gentle at the same time. I think at the end of the day, I would summarize all of that by just being professional, because that's what it is. I mean, you're being a professional when you're doing it. It's the same thing as if you were calling like a call center and they're like, "What do you want?" Right?
Yeah.
Just be professional, right? What else?
How about selective?
Ooh, okay. Selective. I
Mm-hmm.
love this one. Okay, I'll go into why later, but I love that one. Okay, good.
But I mean, being selective
Yep.
means it's beyond correction. So personally, you can correct and you can take them apart.
Yep.
But the idea is not to correct, but to actually seek improvement, which is very different.
There you go.
Pointing out and a mistake is very different from wanting to improve upon that mistake that was made. So it's more of going beyond a correction. So that's why I'm like, it's being selective. It's like, of all the mistakes,
Hmm.
so what's the most meaningful? What is the most important? What is the most relevant?
Right.
And
Here.
what exactly, it's what I consider will make that improvement
So you
happen.
know what? In my mind,
Mhm.
it actually goes one step further than that. And it's not just relevant, but relevant to the task and to the objectives of that lesson. So let's say that we're doing present simple and they wanted to use a past tense and they did that past tense incorrectly.
Yeah.
Well, don't point out that
Don't.
past tense in that moment. Just focus on what you're
Uh-huh.
teaching them, and then but keep that. So what I usually do is I take notes on what other mistakes they made, just so that I know that those are, little issues that we do have to work on in the future. But I won't tear apart their whole answer and go step
Exactly.
by step in every single mistake they made. I'll just focus on the target language, the target
Yeah.
objective, and that's it, right?
Okay, so then we
Yeah.
can just put it down as being objective and selective.
Yeah.
So keeping it
And
objective.
objective oriented.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Oriented. All right, perfect. All right, good. What else? What else is effective feedback?
Um,
So for me, I think something that's super important is to make it timely, right? Timely doesn't necessarily mean right away. It means whenever it's right, depending on the type of activity and assessment that you're having. So for example, if you're practicing fluency, don't interrupt them every minute each time that they make a mistake. But if you're practicing accuracy, then kind of let them finish the sentence and correct them right away. And then, like
Exactly.
come up with these different strategies depending on when the feedback will be most helpful. And going back to what Jose said in the beginning, seeking improvement. I think everything has to kind of go back to that seeking improvement part, right? Because then that's what's going to take us to just giving feedback to giving meaningful feedback. All right,
right.
cool, cool, cool. What else?
I was wondering, it's more like a
Hmm.
question, but for
Sure.
example, if let's say at the place I work, it's always common to see that students, well, not only where I work, but sometimes we see students with mistakes that haven't been corrected at all, if they've just been saying it
Mm-hmm.
wrong like for a long time.
Fossilized
And
mistakes, yeah.
exactly, fossilized mistakes. So then it's just like I've tried to always
Sure.
correct that one mistake whenever they, if they
That's a
continue doing it.
priority. It becomes a
but
priority.
but somehow it's just I've done it. I'm putting an example here with a level I have. It's
Hmm.
level 11, but in level 10, for example, we talked about public spaces a lot, and they
Hmm.
still say public. So I was like, why, like we've been working on this
Hmm.
for a month already. So, and I don't know, how could we really, approach these fossilized errors, what would you
Hmm.
do, like, to try to um you know change them.
So I think that's a super good question, because I think fossilized errors are tricky because they use them for so long that even though they realize it, they may not be actively aware of when they're saying it wrong, because for them it's natural. So in my case, Roddy can also give his take on it. In my case, what I usually like to do with fossilized errors is I like to have them point them out, because if when the day that they're able to point out the fossilized error is because now they realize that it's wrong and now they can move
Awareness.
on from it. Yeah. So I think awareness is one of like the
Mhm.
biggest things.
I'm
Now,
a joker at that
there you
because
go.
I
So
have to be honest. When I see those fossilized errors, and let's say it's a B1, like you're saying, Jose, it's a B1, it's an A1 mistake. What I
Uh-huh.
actually bring it, blow it out of the water. I literally go out, all
yep.
out.
And I
What?
make
And
what?
really?
What is
Okay,
that?
now wait, hold on,
Uh-huh.
stop, time out, go back to that, analyze that, and I
Yep.
do make that pause, and I do make a big deal out of it, but I don't point it out.
Yep.
I make a big deal out of something, and I cause a reflection.
Yep.
Take it apart yourself.
I do
If
something
not,
similar.
help
And
him take it
then
apart.
and then I have them use it as much as possible.
Mm.
So like if on purpose I see that, they've been, for example, the one that you're saying, public, right? So I'll have like a context. I'll be like, all right, so we're going to make 5 sentences using this word. So let's go for it. And each time that you say it wrong, we're going to like turn it into a game and a dynamic where they're just like, oh, shoot, that's right. Okay. Now, another way that you can
Mm,
generate awareness. So one thing is just obviously you can generate awareness in writing through some kind of like, dynamic that kind of like brings it to light or reflects on it. And also if it's pronunciation in speaking form. So what I do with speaking is I have them like compare. So I have them record, for example, in this case, public. So you can give them a sentence
yeah.
where public is repeated like 2 or 3 times. You can record it and then have them record it and have them listen to yours and make corrections on theirs. You don't grade it
Exactly.
yet. So all you're doing is giving them the model and having them record it and listen back to it. So when they listen back to it by themselves, they won't hear the mistake because it's fossilized. But when they hear it and then they compare it with yours, they're going to see the difference.
Hmm.
And then you say, okay, so now that you see the difference, record it again with the correction. Remember, it has to sound like mine. So that exercise of like speaking playback, which is I think is really good for those for pronunciation fossilized mistakes, is a really good exercise. Dynamic.
Right.
Yeah. What else? Do you have anything else that you do for fossilized errors?
I just make a big deal out of them. But I have fun with it, okay? I'm doing
Yeah.
this in the most respectful way,
Yeah.
but that's kind of like what I want them to understand. It's such a big mistake that it's actually why I'm stopping a full class, a full exercise, just to focus on that. Because you normally wait those little mistakes that they can wait till the end of the exercise or the end of the sentence. But it's like, whoa, hold
Yeah.
on, that's structural. I mean, it's not cosmetic, it's structural. Because that's what we're trying to make them understand. You're making a core mistake, not an aesthetic mistake. It's not an S in a plural because we don't know the plural. This is an auxiliary between a singular and a plural. It's the difference between am and is. Am is are, is and are. You know what I mean? It's kind of that kind of structural importance that I actually give them with my reaction to it. So that's my take on it.
I hope these help. If we think of any other ones out, we'll go through them. But yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
All right, what else gives then effective feedback? So we have seeking, obviously making sure that it's seeking improvement, being real or being professional, being selective or objective oriented, timely, going for those fossilized errors. So I'm just going to leave this one on the other side. All right.
Yeah.
What else? What else?
Praise before.
Yes, start with the praise.
Okay.
Always.
Exactly.
Always.
Yeah. So you did a really good
Tell
job.
them what they're doing right.
Oh, yes.
It's not
That's another
about
one.
it's not about adding, it's about subtracting. It's everybody starts with an A. And you go down the scale as you make the mistakes. You don't go up the scale. You don't start failing and you pass the course. You start passing the course and you fail it on the way.
There you go. But you know something else that I like, and I want to extend on that last one that you said, to tell them what to do right. Sometimes teachers are just like, oh, so they give you feedback on the test, and they're like, okay, you got to correct your past tense.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how to say that. How do you say that in Spanish? How do you say it in English?
Concrete. You have to be concrete. You have to be precise in how they can actually make that difference. You're telling them to improve past tense, so how can they improve past tense? Right?
I have to find a word.
And that's the key. Go for it. Find it. Translate. So I think that's essential. Like being very clear and concrete with real ways that they can
make a significant contribution. Sorry.
He wasn't going to be able to move on. You know the better word for it.
It's about being contributive. It's exactly make it meaningful. Don't tell them, oh, your past tense is wrong, and you're like,
but how?
What verb?
And why?
Exactly. On what verb? In what meaning? In what sentence? Give me a little more.
Yep.
So it's about being very, not precise, because I don't know if that's the word, but it's making it meaningful and making a real contribution.
I think it all comes back to what Jose said in the beginning about making it seeking improvement. Because when you seek improvement, you do that. You're not just telling them, oh, you got number 3 wrong, but you're telling them why and how they can improve. So I think for me, that's why I put it in white. That's so
But there's
fundamental.
one more. I think there's one more, and I don't know if it fights for first place.
Sure.
And I'm just going back through one of my feedback sessions. It's the reflection question. Before we
Yes.
even get into it,
Yes.
how do
So,
you think you did?
How do you think you did?
yep. So,
Exactly. What did you feel comfortable with? What did you feel insecure about? What were
mhm.
your strengths? What were your weaknesses in that
Or
particular task?
even when you're making a specific correction, show it back to them. A lot of times, I do this a lot with my students, and I would say like 80% of the times they're able to see the mistake once I show it to them. So let's say that
Mm-hmm.
they're speaking and they say, "Oh yeah, I am agree." I say, "Wait, come here. I am agree. What's wrong with that?" Right? And then I can
Mm-hmm.
get them, and then they'll be like, "Oh, teacher, no, it's supposed to be I agree." That moment you can also gouge like if it's a fossilized error or if it's just a mistake that they
Uh-huh.
made, a slip of the tongue, and that really helps you to see how else to help them improve. Because if it's just a slip of the tongue, you don't spend too much time on it. They fixed it themselves, it was a self-correction, move on.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not able to do that, it's worthwhile going through and say, no, no, this isn't how you do it, this is how you should do it, and this is why. Right?
It's like a self-awareness kind of tool.
Yeah.
It's to
Yeah.
develop that critical thinking factor. And, the
Mm-hmm.
critique is a mirror. Is did I do it? And if not, it's their reaction time. So it's
Yeah.
improving that reaction time every time you stop. Like, for example, when I blow it out of proportion the first time, I know I go all out. But the second time I do it, they go, wait, something's wrong. And they
Oh, dude, I don't
Uh-huh.
even have to
they
do
get,
that.
they get, they
They
get, they
read
get, they
my
get, they get,
face.
they get.
They read my face. I'm super
Uh,
expressive, which is very bad when I'm doing tests, but during the lesson it's
it's
awesome.
helpful.
So I'll be like, like what?
Just as
What?
just a
Just
slip
the
of the
face.
eyebrow.
Yep.
Just the slip of the eyebrow goes, what? Like, wait, hold on, stop, wait.
They'll stop and I'll be like, okay.
They'll
So
stop, reflect, analyze, take it apart. Look, no, sorry, you were right,
but you
teacher.
have to be careful when you're doing tests, because then
You
when you're
can't
doing
do
the
it. It's not a
test,
giveaway.
you have to like put on a poker face and
Poker
not do
face.
that.
Yeah.
But during the lesson, I will go all out with facial expressions. I'll be like,
Definitely. And now even more so.
yeah,
I mean, I would do it
and
in class
exaggerate.
because you could walk around and everything, but now it's just like it's me and this wall. It's like it's got to be good, and everybody's on one little screen, so it's got to mean something, be a little entertaining at best.
Yeah,
Because I
because
mean,
you have
like I
to keep
said, we
them
don't want to be
engaged.
harsh. Hmm.
All right,
It's to
cool, cool,
change the
cool.
entertaining to the engaging, like I said at the beginning.
Something else that I think is important here is to have it be constructive. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you say something like, oh, you know what? Yeah, your speaking is just not there yet. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what do I do with that? So I think it's to make it constructive, to make it positive, even though it could be a negative, just to make it a positive, in the sense that they can keep improving and they will get there eventually, even though it may seem a little difficult. Now, something else that I think is essential with effective feedback is verify that they actually understood, right? So I think a lot of times, like, we'll give feedback and then they'll be like, oh yeah, uh-huh.
You're like, oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
And then they'll keep making the same mistake, but it's because they didn't actually understand the
Assimilate.
correction that you made. Exactly, they didn't assimilate, they didn't get it. So I think verifying that the student understands, and you can use concept checking questions, you can use like all of these different strategies that can allow you to just make sure, rather than just asking, did you understand? Because if you say, did you understand,
They're going to say yes. Nobody's going to
they're
say
just
no in
going to
a
be like,
class.
yeah,
They
and that's
didn't.
it.
They never said yes in a classroom. They're not going to say yes
Less,
online.
less
Uh-huh.
online.
Yeah.
So you really have
Totally.
to like get
I
it
mean,
out
if
of
you
them.
couldn't pressure them face to face, now online is even harder. So we have to be a lot more psychological. We have to have a bigger tool set to analyze
Hmm.
mistakes. We have to be a little more patient. We
Hmm.
have to be more strategic.
Yep. Yep. Overall. All right. Good. Okay. So I think all of these are great examples of what effective feedback is. Now, you guys mentioned the key word here, which was meaningful. Now, when we talk about meaningful, what makes it meaningful? That's my next question. So, what do you guys think?
What makes it meaningful?
Yeah. What makes feedback meaningful? So let's
Maybe
Maybe
see.
it's a relevance to the person.
Okay.
exactly. I was
Meaningful.
thinking about that. Like, if sometimes maybe we're gonna, if we tell the student something he had never heard, right? He's gonna be like,
Mhm.
"Wow, this is the first time a teacher tells me this. Like, I've been confused this whole time. Thank you." I mean,
Mhm.
they're gonna appreciate, the feedback. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, so yeah, I definitely think that personalizing it or making it like, how else can we say that? Like making it, hmm, what other word could we give to that?
Relevant.
Relevant, yeah, making it relevant to their context, to their needs, making it personalized, right? I think all of those are important things to mention here. I think for this one, I think it's super important to make it goal oriented. So if they have an objective of taking a test, it's pointless for you to like point out 100 things that have nothing to do with their test preparations,
Mhm.
right? So, and the same thing, if they're just trying to get through level A1, then again, you don't want to go through 100 things that have nothing to do with level A1. So I think goal
Right.
oriented and not making them so wide, but being as specific and concise as possible, like going through like those SMART goals, I think is essential because then you always bring it back to the goal. So it's like, oh, remember our goal was tan 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 tan,
Yeah.
and you were able to do tan tan, but we're kind of missing tan tan, right? So
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference in how and like that the meaningful is sorry that the feedback is meaningful to them, right? So that was the other one.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys think?
Mm,
So kind of piggybacking off of that one is showing their improvement because I think like having them realize that they have milestones and then how they've accomplished part of that milestone even though they're still missing a part, like what they like those little milestones are important in terms of like keeping it meaningful and positive as well.
right.
And yeah.
In showing their improvement, there's a habit that I have, which
Mhm.
is the habit of a good memory, meaning I remember their mistakes. I remember those core mistakes. So what I do is I love the praise and accomplishment because it's not today, it's tomorrow, maybe the day after, maybe the next class, maybe another week goes by. But when they hit it on the mark, that's when you go, oh, you got it. You remember? You bring them back to that point in time where that was a hurdle, where it was an obstacle. And with your help in that practice, and it's unconscious or consciously doing it, it's going, that's it. And that's when that rapport between teacher student becomes so much stronger because like, dude, remembers? Like they look at you like, you remember that? I'm like, of course. And you were, and everything comes back to me. Then remember we
Yep.
talked about this. Remember you made this. Remember we did this.
Yep.
And they go, wow. And they can actually go, it is an improvement. So it's that
Yeah.
recognition of it.
And you know something else though, like that's possible if you have clear goals or if you have really good memory. But if we go back to like the part of if you go back to the part of not correcting every single little thing that they
Exactly.
say,
Not being picky.
and then you do have to have those clear goals because if not, then you're like, so remember like we had struggled with this goal with this little milestone that you couldn't do and then now we can do it. So I think that's important too, right?
I always have an image in my mind, and it's kind of corny, but
Uh-huh.
it's been in my mind ever since. I mean, I had a talk about this with a teacher about like 10 years ago, and it's a commercial. It's, I think it's, I don't remember, it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It's choose
Mhm.
wisely. It's the Pepsi commercial and the Coca Cola commercial in the States. That choose wisely is what I always think of before I start my feedback. It's looking at the student, looking at the situation, taking their effort into consideration. How far have they pushed themselves to get to that point? If it's a relaxed student, I'm going to be a little firmer. But if one of those students that's putting in the effort, it's putting in the effort, and he's pedaling, it's just a little pat on the back, going, "Hey, watch this next time," and keep on pedaling through. So it's to choose wisely what we want to feedback on. So I think it's that goal oriented kind of feel that we were talking about before.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think that in light of that as well, like I think that creating like a plan for them moving forward is essential, right? So that's the like last step of like making sure that it's meaningful, because then in the feedback that you're giving them, it's personalized, it's relevant, it's goal oriented. Because it's goal oriented, you can show their improvement through the milestones. And then finally, it's creating that game plan where they can actually gain some strategies in how to close the gap, right? So remember, they need to be here, they're here, what do they have to do to close this gap? That's where the feedback becomes the most meaningful, because that's where you're going to be able to take them from one step to the next. Because if you don't give them that, then they'd have no way of getting from point A to point B. So I think when we talk about closing the gap, it's being sure that it's like for example, the strategy that we gave Jose earlier about speaking playback, that's a
Yeah.
strategy that the student can do on their own to be able to improve their pronunciation and get rid of fossilized errors, right? So we're giving them the strategy of how they can do that. Now it's on them to be able to implement it and keep practicing or improving, right? So I think that's also important, because if you don't give them that, they don't know what to do from there, basically, right? Because that's the normal process. That's what we're the teachers. We're guiding them in that process. All right, cool. Now, I have another question. So we talked about what's effective feedback, what's meaningful feedback, right? Now, my next question is how do we give feedback? So let's go with another little sticky note. So if you notice, I love this. I think they're so cool. All right, so we have our sticky notes. So what do you think? It, what do you think are ways that we can actually do this? How do we give feedback? How do you guys do it?
Depending on the medium.
Okay, let's take online classes because we're here, right? This is our
But still,
reality.
depending on the medium, that would take us a little further, because then it's not the medium, depending on the app, right? Depending on the
Okay.
activity. Because, like, for example, if I'm doing a Word document collaborative / grammar structure kind of thing, you can use the comments in a Word doc section, right? Like annotations.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, the voice notes that can be inserted into the comments by plugin.
We
We can't hear you.
can hear you.
Hello, hello, hello.
There
There.
you go.
All
Yes.
right. Okay, so there's two that I usually
There's
use. One
two.
is
It's Kaizen, and I
Kaizen.
don't
Do you
remember
remember
the
the
other
other
one.
one? All right. So the other one is it's
Mono
actually
notes,
Mote.
Gomo notes,
M O
There you
T
go.
MOTE. So those are two that those are my go-to apps to leave voice notes on
Integrated into Google
documents.
Chrome and everything Google oriented.
So
So it's very cool.
these are two actually plugins. So the Mote one you can integrate into your Google Chrome as an extension, and Kaizen you can actually put as an add-on to your Google Drive. And then either way, what you have to keep in mind though, Kaizen, your students have to have Kaizen as well, whereas Mote, they don't have to have anything. So I prefer Mote, but it's up to you guys. But voice notes are another great way of doing it.
Yep.
Okay, what else?
Individual sessions.
Okay, so like personalized feedback.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a one-on-one, but that's when I have and I use this as a system. If it's a one or two thing correction, I try to do that for everyone, and I don't mention anyone in particular. But if I see enough weakness in a student, I will try to pull them aside, not call any attention to it. But
Yeah.
I have a limit. If the person and the group, after the exercise, I can start going common denominators, because I start finding common mistakes in all of them. All that go into the group correction, that goes into a group session feedback / correction / practice kind of session. And if I see it's this person in particular, and I'd rather have a softer, more heartful conversation with them, I go and I pull them aside.
Cool. And I think
Exactly.
just to kind of I think something in terms of how will also depend a lot on if you have not if, but what kind of rubric or scoring system you're using. So because if you have a rubric in place, it is a lot easier to find the words of how to give that person feedback in terms of like, well, I'm going to take this criteria from the rubric and I'm going to add that to the feedback, and then I have like an evidence to show that person, and I can do that in writing or I can do that in the personalized feedback. But I think when it's very vague and I don't have a rubric or a scoring guide, it becomes more difficult to find the right words or to find the right criteria to come up with in any of these situations. So I think that having like that rubric and scoring guide is essential to make it all come together, you know?
As we said before, keeping it objective.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's
It's
not
not
just my
correcting
opinion,
just for the
but
sake of correcting. It's actually going, this is goal oriented, this is part of the course, this is part of the structure, and if necessary to say, it's part of the graded component.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now
This
Yeah.
will
something
impact the grade. There are mistakes that will not. It's
now
just
some
little carpentry here or there, but the real core factors that we know are part of the summative and formative strategy, depending on the course, that will lead us to this type of feedback.
Now, something there though that I like to do, and I think students really appreciate it, is I'll give them the general aim of what we're doing. Like that's set up either by the curriculum or the textbook or whatever it is that I'm doing. But I actually design the goal, the rubric with them. So if we have an activity, like those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 criteria that I'm going to choose for my rubric, I design it with them. So I'm like, okay, guys, so if this is the aim, let's say your aim is to make a presentation, what should I be grading? And then together we build out the rubric so they have it so clear as to what I'm expecting from them. Because I think that's like the last thing I want to add is
That's
I
pretty
think
cool.
that when you
I
don't
personally have
tell,
never done that
I
inclusion
have, it's
with more than
really,
3 students. I've done it on my personal students,
oh,
my
I've done it
private
with groups of
tutoring, but I
30.
haven't done it with groups.
Oh, I've done it with groups of 30 and it's so enriching because they all participate and they know they're aware of what I'm going to be like. They're, oh, teacher, I have to spell correctly, right? Yeah, and I have to use this and I have to do that. So they are so aware of what it is that I'm expecting from them. It's just kind of putting it down on paper. And the other thing with that
Right.
though is that if they build that out, your feedback becomes a lot easier to give, right? First. And second, the other like advantage that I see when you're doing like personalized rubrics with them is that they can also like create what's important for them. Like they can include what, like if for them speaking is the most important thing, they can include that in there, you know? So it really becomes more meaningful for them in terms of what you're going to be grading and what you're going to be doing. um, I've done that with a lot of groups, and I think it really changes their outlook on what they're doing. And then the last thing is just like when a teacher, like when a student is going to be graded on something, I think it's important that you tell them what exactly is going to be graded, even if you have your rubric, like your own rubric already made, or if on the other hand you made it with them. Because for example, like you'll have a student and say, okay, you're going to tell me about famous, what did you do on your last vacation? So they stand up, they do everything, they said everything in past tense, they were fluent, they did a good job, but then at the end you're like, yeah, you did good, but you didn't use enough irregular verbs. So if they didn't know that you were looking for a good balance
Yeah.
between regular and irregular verbs, of course they're not going to keep that in mind. But if you tell them from the beginning, look, I expect you to include regular and irregular verbs, affirmative, negative question statements in your presentation, and just make sure that it's all in past tense. You can use any past tense that you want, simple, continuous, progressive, whatever you want, but past tense has to be consistent. So they already know. So like if they start speaking and then all of a sudden they use everything in past simple, but then they start speaking in present simple all of a sudden, which a lot of them do, there you go. They
Mhm.
know that their score is going to come down. So they know what to expect. So I just think that sometimes we kind of have our students do activities, but we don't give them enough information for them to be graded fairly. You
They're
know?
flying blind.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that was like my last take on it. So just kind of making them aware of the criteria, right?
Totally.
Beforehand. I don't know if you guys have anything there to add. So I think this is pretty good. So we've been able to go through them. What is feedback? We went through what makes effective feedback,
Mm-hmm.
meaningful feedback, and how we could actually give the feedback to people. And I really like this like bubble of fossilized areas, and I hope those work, Jose. Let us know if they work or not.
Totally. I'll put them into practice ASAP.
Perfect, perfect. That was pretty much all I had for today. Now, what I do want to invite you guys to is that on the YouTube channel, we actually have something that's called ELT Voice Notes. And with ELT Voice Notes, we have one of the last episode that we put up is all about feedback, like giving effective feedback. So if you go
Right.
in, you can go to playlists and you can go to voice notes, right? So we have like the old ones, over
Yeah.
here, we have the old ones. The last ones were about how you can reflect on your teaching. That was our first episode. And our second episode was on giving feedback. So it goes through all of this and it gives like really specific strategies that you can use. And all of the videos are under 2 minutes. So it's just like to the point, effective feedback that you can give with theories and strategies that you can use. So I hope that that comes in handy as well. Any other questions, Jose, or challenges that you've had so that we can wrap up?
No, I think that's pretty nice. And I also have to work like
Now,
minute.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So no, we're actually wrapping up because we usually try to keep it for 1 hour so that it's easy to
right.
digest. So we're done. I just wanted
excellent,
to share
excellent
all of this with you
conversation.
guys. I'm so happy because I think that we went through a lot of really cool ideas,
Yeah.
and it also helps us to kind of see like, oh, we're not alone. Like some of the things I thought, other people also thought.
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
That's
yeah.
great.